Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to to day two of BioAlberta's Policy Forum. My name is Rob Stoddard, and I'm the President and CEO of BioAlberta. Absolutely thrilled with the way yesterday went. We had a great powerhouse panels and keynote, and really appreciate not only the work and expertise that the panelists brought forward, but the questions and the engagement from the audience. So I'm looking forward to having the same thing today, different talent, different topics, but the same engagement and enthusiasm. Wanted to quickly just remind you that we couldn't do these events without our sponsors for this forum. So our panel sponsor for yesterday's AMR session was Merck Canada. Our gold sponsors, MedTech Plus, Innovative Medicines Canada, and Novartis and Gilead. Silver, Medtronic and MedTech Canada. Bronze sponsors, Pfizer, 360 Public Affairs, and Biotalent Canada. With that, let's get rolling into the business. We had a little bit of a change this morning. I mentioned it yesterday that Justin Riemer, the Assistant Deputy Minister for the Prairies region for Western Diversification, had an unavoidable personal conflict that he had to attend to today, but he did have time to provide us with his presentation. So we've got the best of both worlds. We have Justin's presentation, which we'll get to in just a short minute, but we also have Jason Pincock, who is the co-chair of the Health Analytic and Diagnostics Sector Group, to answer the questions or answer the tough questions afterwards. Many of you know Jason. He's the CEO of DynaLIFE Medical Labs, which, if you've had anything revolving testing in the last few years, you will definitely know Jason and DynaLIFE. Jason is an accomplished CEO. He's certified management accountant by trade, has gone through the Queen's executive program, and he's participating in all sorts of bio-related and economic development items. He's a trusted advisor to the City of Edmonton. He's the chair of Edmonton Health City, and probably most important, he is a big family man. And when I say big family, I mean it. He has 6 active children, so he spends a lot of time in the mountains enjoying some of the great things that Alberta has to offer us, and the reason why we believe this is the best province to live, work, and play in. So we'll bring back Jason right after the presentation, but for now, please enjoy the time from Justin Riemer on building a health analytics and diagnostics cluster in Alberta.
Thanks to Rob Stoddard and BioAlberta for the opportunity to speak with you today. Please forgive me for pre-recording this presentation. I had a prior family commitment, so I can't present live or be there for the Q&A, but please feel free to lob as hard a questions as you can to Jason Pincock at the end. I have worked in economic development in this province for my entire career. And in the past few years with Alberta Health, AHS, now with the federal government, I've had a front row seat in the potential for life sciences innovation in Alberta. It's an area I'm incredibly passionate about, and it's been very exciting to see the industry evolve. And from my vantage point, I am confident that if we continue to be collaborative and strategic, Alberta's life sciences sector will be poised for sustained growth into the future. So today, I'd like to tell you about what the Government of Canada, and specifically what WD has done in partnership with our stakeholders to help catalyze growth in the life sciences sector. As all of you know, in early 2020, our world shook from the onset of the pandemic. Many long-term initiatives were put on hold, and we pivoted to provide immediate relief and support for businesses, individuals, and families. In June of 2020, the federal government quickly established the Industry Strategy Council with a time-limited mandate to identify COVID-19 on key sectors of the Canadian economy, including health and biosciences, and to lay a path for economic recovery. Industry leadership and voices are incredibly important and critical to the recovery plan. And that is why the Health and Biosciences Economic Strategy Table, which was chaired by Karima S. Savar of Quark Ventures in BC, brought together industry leaders from across the country to strengthen private and public collaboration and position Canada for long-term growth. That table is now going to reconvene and turn its recommendations to the Industry Strategy Council action to accelerate initiatives in this area. These areas include adjusting health procurement and sourcing strategies, adopting value-based procurement across the Canadian healthcare system, streamlining regulatory approval processes, creating a federal health organization with both a joint health and economic development mandate, and targeting investments in digital infrastructure. So despite the shift in focus to responding to the pandemic, there are a few actions that have been taken that I'd like to highlight. For example, steps have been taken to address the procurement challenges by launching the Can Health networks. These networks are attempting to accelerate the uptake of technologies by connecting researchers, entrepreneurs, and health systems to take advantage of faster procurement processes. At least 15 healthcare institutions in this country, including AHS, have joined this initiative to jointly test and procure technology from healthcare SMEs. An external advisory committee on regulatory competitiveness has been created. The committee is going to bring together business, academic, and consumer representatives to identify opportunities to streamline regulations while protecting health, security, and safety. Regulatory sandboxes for new and innovative medical products have been established, along with regulatory roadmaps to help address bottlenecks for innovation. And we've also announced a broader federal commitment to advancing cutting-edge research in two areas of medicine: rare diseases and precision medicine and artificial intelligence. Health Canada has launched an online engagement of the subject on rare diseases. The goal is to work with a variety of different stakeholders to co-develop a plan to ensure that patients with rare diseases have better and more consistent coverage for their treatments. This commitment was reaffirmed in the 2020 Fall Economic Statement and in the speech from the throne. Alberta, namely the University of Calgary and Alberta's Children's Hospital, play a crucial role in the Care for Rare initiative to create a genomics database for rare disease research. And in an effort to help strengthen Canada's health digital infrastructure, a $49 million contribution was provided to the Digital Health Discovery Platform to create a pan-Canadian tool to help accelerate next-generation precision medicine technologies. The platform includes partnerships with health organizations across Canada, including hospitals, universities, companies, and startups. Our very own Alberta Machine Intelligence Institute is a key partner in this initiative. I know Alberta Innovates is also looking to invest in health data platform projects through a competitive process they're currently running. Every one of these steps is important to Canada and for Alberta. Alberta's quality health data platform opened numerous possibilities for collaboration in the field of precision medicine and AI. In addition to these strategic priorities, Canada has been committed to fighting the COVID-19 pandemic, leveraging all the resources at our disposal. Since March 2020, the government has assessed over 6,500 responses from businesses and individuals to the industry call for action to support Canada's fight against COVID-19. Through this initiative, the government and industry have collaborated to successfully meet the critical needs of frontline health workers, including face shields, surgical masks, medical gowns, hand sanitizer, ventilators, and testing equipment. Alberta's energy and life sciences sector have stepped up to fill some of these needs. Fluid Energy Group, headquartered out of Calgary, chemical processing and manufacturing entity, was an early respondent to the call for action and rapidly retooled their production lines to provide hand sanitizer for Canada's frontline health workers. The company subsequently received a federal contract for 10 million liters of hand sanitizer. Over the last year, Fluid Energy Group's hand sanitizer operations have become a permanent and growing line of business, with the company expanding to international markets with the support from Export Development Canada. Roswell Downhole Technologies, an energy sector sensor cables manufacturer, responded to the Innovation Solutions Canada Challenge as well to develop alternative filtration material for respirators and surgical masks. Through this challenge, the company has received funding from the National Research Council to repurpose their machinery to produce conventional polypropylene meltdown material. As of November 2020, Roswell is producing 58 tons per month, or the equivalent to 58 million masks per month, and supplying Canadian manufacturers of medical-grade surgical masks and respirators. Both of these companies demonstrate the ability of Albertans to adjust to hard times and rise to meet the critical unexpected challenges that have been brought upon as a result of COVID-19. The federal government is also undertaking serious efforts to boost Canada's domestic capacity to develop manufacturing vaccines for COVID-19, largely through targeted investments from the Strategic Innovation Fund and the National Research Council. The federal government has provided over $23 million to 6 Canadian firms advancing promising COVID-19 vaccines, including 2 Alberta-based firms. Through NRC IRAP, nearly $10 million has been invested in Alberta's domestic vaccine research and production capacity. These research investments are in addition to the $1 billion being spent on vaccine procurement. You have likely heard about the University of Saskatchewan's Vaccine and Infectious Disease Organization and International Vaccine Center. It's called VIDO-InterVac. It's the only facility of its kind in Canada and is the only non-government entity to have the largest containment level 3 facility. A recent investment of $23 million from Western Diversification will help accelerate the tremendous work already being done at VIDO-InterVac to commercialize a vaccine against the COVID virus. WD has had a strong, long-standing relationship with VIDO-InterVac and has been supporting the evolution of this organization since 1991. This leads me to the work that we do, which can be compared to planting the seeds that years later take hold to help the economy succeed in new and emerging areas. During this time, we have continued to pursue strategic regional economic development goals that we were focused on prior to the pandemic, and we are working to ensure that those plans are adapting to the new realities of market conditions. To those of you who aren't familiar with who we are, Western Economic Diversification is one of 6 federal regional development agencies in Canada. We promote the development and diversification of Western Canada's economy and advance the interests of the West in national economic policies, programs, and projects. Through our programming, WD supports the development of regional innovation ecosystems, invests in business scale-ups, and delivers relief funding to businesses affected by COVID-19. One of our major strategic priorities is to advance the growth of regional industry clusters. At WD, we believe that clusters are a long-term play and an investment for diversification. Clusters can help drive economic development as a result of multiple organizations working together towards the same purpose, and generating innovation through concentration of talented people who share interest and knowledge of the industry. WD's regional cluster opportunities are nascent and diverse. For example, our BC region is developing an emerging cluster in clean technology, while Manitoba region has pursued cluster development in heavy equipment and vehicle manufacturing. In Alberta, we step back to analyze where we could have a measurable impact. The health and life sciences sector is broad, it's diverse, and thriving, but we didn't want to boil the ocean. So in early 2020, WD engaged Carvera Group to gain an understanding of the potential for an emerging health analytics and diagnostic, or HAD cluster in Alberta. It was clear there was appetite from both public and private sector organizations in Alberta to seize market opportunities and build alliances of mutual benefit. Alberta has many strengths to support a thriving HAD cluster. 1, we have rich and varied data sets within our single healthcare delivery service provider. 2, we have world-class academic institutions that produce top-level research and talent in diagnostics, data analytics, machine learning, and artificial intelligence. And 3, we have strong ecosystem players, including post-secondary institutions and organizations like the Institute for Health Economics, W21C, BioAlberta, Health City, and the Life Sciences Innovation Hub. Right now, we have at least 64 companies in Alberta operating in this space. We have dozens of strong emerging companies looking to grow and scale, and combined with a few firms providing leadership and guidance. In addition to the strength of Alberta's HAD cluster, we've also seen some compelling evidence for the demand for these products in international jurisdictions. More than ever, there is a significant demand for rapid diagnostic testing, analytical support for administrative and clinical decisions, and advanced digital and virtual healthcare solutions. This is the case in Alberta and across the world, and this is the market that is only expected to continue growing. Although the HAD sector in Alberta is nascent, there are opportunities to grow and scale and expand to other global markets, including the US, Australia, and the EU. WD partnered with Deloitte to better understand the quantification of the current and forecast global market opportunity for the HAD sector in Alberta. And based on Deloitte's findings, in the US, we found that the broader diagnostics and medical laboratory industry generated approximately $52.3 billion in revenue in 2020. The US healthcare analytics market was valued at approximately $8.1 billion in 2019 and is expected to reach $20.54 billion by 2025, more than doubling of that sector in the next 5 years. The EU's diagnostic market was estimated at $14.4 billion in 2020 and is expected to grow to $18 billion in 2025. And lastly, the EU analytics market was sized at approximately $2.7 billion in 2020 and is expected to grow to $8.7 billion by the end of 2025. The international market growth and opportunities for Alberta companies is promising. However, there are significant challenges that need to be considered and addressed. In order for the sector to take off, including data sets, data access, privacy, infrastructure, access to funding, availability of expertise, optimal commercialization models, and changing public policy objectives. To address some of these key sector challenges and to build alignment on priority areas to advance the sector, a health and analytics and diagnostics task team was formed in May 2020. The task team was co-chaired by the CEOs of Kent Imaging and DynaLIFE Medical Labs and included key industry stakeholders, innovation ecosystem players, and economic development partners from all orders of government. WD's role was to be a catalyst in forming this team and a supporter. However, over the long term, such an initiative needs to be driven by industry. By convening this task team, we've been able to engage various industry players on how the CAD sector can best be supported in the province. So one of the foundational steps to cluster development is to have clear priorities and goals and settle on a common vision. The HAD cluster team agreed on a two-part vision for the industry at their first meeting. One, Alberta can become a recognized leader in the development and deployment of medical diagnostic technologies and have reliable and accessible health and administrative data that underpins timely diagnostic technology development. And two, Alberta has a globally recognized critical mass of health, data, and diagnostic companies that support attraction of further investment, relocation of companies from elsewhere, and contributes to the innovation of the broader life sciences industry. The team discussed what steps were needed to achieve these goals, agreeing to divide the discussion into 4 distinct topics. I should note that many of the issues the team discussed are not unique to health and analytics diagnostics sector. Many of these challenges are applicable to a variety of tech sectors. The 4 action areas for the HAD task team were mentorship and advisory services, access to capital, supporting tech validation and adoption, and health data utilization. The first area for discussion was early stage mentorship and advisory supports. These services are often the difference between success and failure, helping businesses avoid repeating mistakes of their predecessors and saving them time and money. This is especially the case for life science tech companies who need to have clear more complex regulatory hurdles than most industries and often have a harder time identifying their first customers. As our life science ecosystem in Alberta matures, we grow our base of successful entrepreneurs and companies that have navigated through this arduous product development path. Alberta has successful entrepreneurs willing to mentor and many new entrepreneurs who need their advice. And the problem is really not therefore supply or demand. The problem is coordination and efficiency. Companies need to find the right mentors, and mentors need to find companies that can truly leverage their specific expertise. In addition to tailored mentorship, companies often struggle to identify the right support services for their stage of development. Health diagnostic companies have a very specific set of needs in terms of tech development, regulatory approvals, understanding the reimbursement path, and connections to the clinical system. The services available at each step of the product development path are often confusing and time-consuming to navigate. 2 actions from the cluster were identified in our discussions. First, that we need to have an easily understandable roadmap of the regulatory process for medical devices, and we need to help companies navigate the stages of approval. And second, we need to structure online registries that we can connect entrepreneurs and mentors with. Next, the task team discussed the investment landscape for companies in Alberta. Access to capital is a complex story in this province. There's a widespread perception that Alberta doesn't have enough supply of investment, that startups here are unable to access the capital they need to scale up and bring products to market. While capital is available, there are underlying issues with both sides of the deal flow in the sector. Health startups often struggle with being pitch ready, and there are very few investors who truly understand both the complexity and opportunity in early stage health technology. Access to funding in and of itself is not really the problem. In fact, 2020 is going to be a record year for Alberta in terms of raising venture capital. There are opportunities for companies to unlock more investment by improving their pitch readiness and targeting the right investors. The discussion identified 3 action items for this cluster. We need to track and report startup and investment activity in the province to build the narrative of innovation activity in Alberta. We need to find ways to shorten the product development cycle for our entrepreneurs and to make it easier for them to attract early investment. And finally, we need to provide training on the peculiarities of life science investment to both investors and entrepreneurs. The third task team discussion concentrated on the crucial areas of tech validation and adoption. Challenges that companies face with tech validation and adoption have often been reduced to an endemic problem with our healthcare providers in Alberta and Canada. However, there are pathways and opportunities both inside and outside organizations like Alberta Health Services. There are opportunities to clarify Alberta's health care system technology validation and adoption pathways and highlight the emerging needs of our healthcare system. However, given that there are limited opportunities for local technology adoption within this province, the primary focus for the cluster should be on supporting technology validation. This discussion has also produced 3 action items. We can support mechanisms like tech verification sandboxes that provide rapid validation and approval of technologies without necessarily adopting it. Health tech entrepreneurs are in need of opportunities to test their assumptions in a clinical environment in order to test compatibilities with other tech and incorporate feedback from clinicians. Furthermore, we should comprehensively map out the venues for tech adoption and validation that are available for the province through organizations like long-term care centers and make that information widely available and easy to understand. Finally, the task team discussed the issue of health data utilization for non-academic research. Alberta's acute care system has produced excellent administrative data, but privacy concerns have generally meant that innovative healthcare companies face challenges in accessing that data. Initiatives from the Health Department of the Government of Alberta, Alberta Innovates, and Health City are already underway to simplify regulations, provide data alternatives to SMEs, and improve the quality of data requests, which is an excellent start. The task team also recommended finding ways to better communicate the value of healthcare data to the public. Data liberalization is a sensitive topic, so gaining public support for such an initiative will require demonstrating the benefits of allowing entrepreneurs access to healthcare data. Altogether, the task team's recommendations spell out a detailed agenda for the ignition of a HAD cluster in Alberta. If all these action items are to be implemented effectively, we could create a self-sustaining engine of economic growth in this province, which would have the added benefit of producing cutting-edge healthcare technology and improving patient outcomes in healthcare systems across Canada and around the world. However, WD isn't waiting for a cluster to formally come together before we get involved. As we continue to encourage cluster development, we're also constantly supporting new projects to advance the growth of the sector, making targeted investments both in companies and in organizations that support the ecosystem. Just in the past 3 years, we've invested $30 million in Alberta-based life sciences projects, many of which are in the areas of health analytics and diagnostics. We were pleased to fund the Life Sciences Innovation Hub with over $3 million. This space at the University of Calgary provides programming, incubation, maker spaces, specialized equipment, leasable space for companies, and labs for academic research with commercial potential. There have been a number of startups actively using this space since its opening, spawning all sorts of synergies, coaching, and networks, fostering new company growth. This facility has really been at the locus of collaboration for the Calgary life sciences sector. WD has also provided $400,000 to the HATCH program, the Health Technology Commercialization Hub, or HATCH program, is facilitated by Health City and operated by Brightsquid. Brightsquid's a successful digital health company based in Alberta. And the Hatch program provides product development advice and training to assist SMEs to navigate through that very challenging health, digital, legal, and privacy requirement landscape so that entrepreneurs can have access to commonly used EMR systems. The program addresses some of the critical actions identified by our task team. WD has also supported the Institute for Health Economics with nearly $1 million. The IHE is providing third-party objective health economics evaluations and evidence gathering for SMEs to provide them with a stronger business case to support market adoption. As I've said, Alberta has an array of exciting health technologies, entrepreneurs, and firms. Many of these startups are all over the place, but there have been a few companies that have graduated into the scale-up phase and are successfully selling their products to health systems within Alberta, Canada, and around the globe. I'd like to give you a couple of examples. By telling these stories, I hope to inspire others to and demonstrate that it is possible to grow a successful health technology firm within Alberta. Circle Cardiovascular Image develops cardiac imaging processing solutions and provides physicians with the tools they need to accurately quantify and diagnose complex cardiovascular diseases. Their addition of AI and data analytics capabilities improve patient care and solidify their position as the global industry leader in advanced cardiovascular diagnostics. Circle has seen adoption of their technology here in Alberta, having sold their products to AHS, but have also successfully expanded into 40 different countries around the world. WD provided $2.6 million in repayable funding to Circle to integrate artificial intelligence into their diagnostic tools. One other example, Kent Imaging's multispectral medical imaging device gives surgeons and wound care clinicians access to valuable information about tissue health. The data generated from this device results in better treatment planning and subsequently better patient outcomes. In January, Kent Image announced plans for global commercialization following a successful $15 million raise from TVM Capital Life Sciences Venture Capital Group. Kent has been deploying devices to groups such as Covenant, as well as other Canadian and many US healthcare delivery systems. WD provided $1.1 million in repayable funding through the Business Scale-Up and Productivity Program I mentioned earlier to help Kent Imaging bring this innovative diagnostic tool into the surgical market. So in conclusion, recognizing the growing importance of Alberta's health analytics and diagnostic sector, industry stakeholders, ecosystem supporters, and economic development agencies are taking steps right now to develop opportunities for the sector, both locally and within export markets. The growth of this sector in Alberta will have a positive outcome on patients in the healthcare system, with the added benefit of contributing to economic development and diversification in the province. With the HAD sector continuing to grow, and as demand for healthcare innovations continue to increase, Alberta companies can position themselves and compete globally. Moving forward, WD will continue to play a supporting role in cluster development, but the cluster development initiative itself will be led by members of Alberta's HAD industry and innovation ecosystem. As WD lets go of the reins, we felt it was necessary to transition cluster leadership into the hands of enthusiastic, well-regarded industry stakeholders that have a strong vision for our health innovation ecosystem. Cluster leadership will require both the capacity and the desire to drive forward important industry initiatives, which I know our next speaker has. So with that said, I'm pleased to turn the mic over to Jason Pincock, CEO of Medical Life Labs and Chair of Health City, to talk about the vision for the HAD Coalition and the great work underway by Health City. Over to you, Jason.
Well, thank you very much, Justin, virtually. And I'll tell you, when Justin phoned me, and he was quite upset that he couldn't do this in person, but his choice was do it by video or sleep in my driveway for the next 6 months. So I think he made the right choice. And it is interesting to introduce and talk to Justin as a member of the federal government, because I can't imagine a bigger cheerleader for Alberta than Justin Riemer. So it's great to have Justin in the WD role, and I think he's already doing some amazing work and building on many things that Jim had started as his predecessor. So I wanted to carry off where really Justin left off, which is what are the next steps around the HAD cluster? And maybe the best way to describe what's in the HAD cluster is we looked at the HAD cluster as being anything related to clinicians or clinical development where you're making a decision. And that can be based on a test, it can be based on an algorithm, it can be based on a novel piece of software, but it's really about helping clinicians make better decisions, make more accurate decisions, and changing sort of care paths. And so it was interesting as both of my work as Health City, I sit as a mentor within the brand new IMYAG program. We are actively working with the community in Calgary around biotech development. And there seemed to be this cluster of opportunity in this area of decision support. And whether that was a novel diagnostic or that was a novel piece of software or a novel piece of machine learning, this is just sort of an exploding area. And the reason that it attracted significant interest is it ties to some of the unique assets we have in the province, as Justin mentioned, around data, as well as, it is a process by which, unlike pharmaceuticals and some of the other ones, diagnostics is a more rapid path to market. And especially for a cluster that is developing, it allows you to see wins much earlier than you would in some of the traditional medical device structures or in the pharmaceutical structures. And not to say that those won't continue and those aren't key parts, but there was this new emerging set of organizations and SMEs that was developing that had very unique needs around access to data, regulatory access, mentorship in those areas, and access to sort of pilots and markets within the Alberta environment. And so there was a decision that this was an area of focus that we could take in our health ecosystem overall. And so the HAD cluster is really a focus for the province. And I think one of the benefits, and to Justin's credit, he said, I'm willing to come and I'm willing to invest as WD and I'm willing to partner with whoever wants to partner, but we need to do it as a province and we need to not do it as individual organizations. And so a decision was made to establish a coalition of the willing to really pursue this. And when that coalition got together, one of the decisions was that coalition needed a vehicle by which to begin executing on the next steps. And the vehicle that was selected for that by the province as a whole within the coalition was Health City. And the reason is that Health City had established infrastructure, was capable of supporting funding and supporting sort of the next steps in the development of the cluster. And so Reg has volunteered to help host and move that activity forward. And as the chair of Health City, I also recognized that we needed to change Health City to support the next movement in the HAD cluster. And so Health City is transitioning to becoming much more of a provincial platform. Our steering committee, although it already had provincial membership, will include new members from especially the Calgary jurisdiction into the steering and guidance group of Health City. And even on Monday, when I sat before City Council in Edmonton, I made it very clear that the future of the health innovation ecosystem was a provincial move, and they were very supportive of that. I didn't get any pushback on that whatsoever. So, I think it's an exciting time to really gather our resources, bring all of the parties together and do that in a way that moves this cluster, but the ecosystem as a whole forward. And I think that you're starting to see a lot of that happen with both not just the HAD cluster, but just in the ecosystem in general. And we're seeing new sort of investment opportunities from both the provincial and the federal government, where we're able to act as an ecosystem in creating platforms that will help multiple SMEs. And so I'm very excited to see that. This is a long road. There's no silver bullets. No one's going to just get immediate access to anything. It is a long, hard push, but it is a push that is going to take a decade, but it has to start somewhere. And I think over the last couple of years, as an ecosystem across this province, we are making good progress. So Justin asked me to step in on his behalf. He said you guys could throw the hardball questions. I saw the questions you posed to Minister Schweitzer yesterday, so please take it a little easier on me. I'm one of you. But I'm really here to sort of help you understand the work that's been done and questions about what the future might be. And let's see what we can commit Justin to in this discussion. So with that, I'll open up to you, Rob, and we'll take some questions.
Excellent. Thanks for that overview, Jason. First, I just want to go back and thank Justin for taking the time to provide that video. And please remember, put your questions into the chat so we can relay them to Jason and answer them, so he's not trying to be an IT guy while he's sitting there answering your questions. And as I promised yesterday, for the questions we don't get to, we're going to find a way to post the answers to those so everybody can feel that conversation was finished. I want to go back to one thing in Justin's presentation, and that was his conversation around HBEST. And for those of you who've been involved with BioAlberta, we've been long advocates of HBEST, involved in social media campaigns, and it's a consistent push for us to try and move the federal environment forward, especially on areas around modern and agile regulations. We're also active in pointing out where the objectives and direction laid out in HBEST conflict with other federal health policy initiatives. PMPRB comes to mind for most of us in that aspect. We also see HBEST as really being an opportunity for the provincial government here to step up and encourage and demonstrate policy leadership on some of these issues. And if you look at how Edmonton, Calgary, and provincial organizations like BioAlberta are moving together in a coordinated fashion, we're starting to see areas where the provincial government and the federal government have similar objectives or similar ideas. We just need to make sure that we're working in a similar fashion, that we've figured out how to work regionally, despite the natural battle of Edmonton and Calgary, and move really to that Team Alberta ecosystem point of view. So Jason, thanks to you and to your co-chair, Pierre Lemire from Kent Imaging, for your efforts as co-chairs. This was not a simple task, but it's produced a tremendous positive result, I think, for the ecosystem as we move forward. I'm going to start off with one question to give you a chance to see what you've desire and what you learn on that overall look across Alberta. And you've seen the ecosystem development, and what are the key components that you see in building that ecosystem? First, tester assessment capacity, and one of the questions I asked the minister yesterday: how do we attract that capital for growth and expansion as opposed to the pre-commercial and pre-research phase?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question that's come up, in a number of conversations, which is it shouldn't be about just startup. What we need it to be is also about scale up, because and I noticed in one of the Schweitzer questions yesterday was, how do we get organizations to build and stay in Alberta? And the answer is because there is opportunity to do that here, right? I mean, ultimately, I believe fundamentally money is smart, and money will go where opportunity is. What you need to create is the opportunity, and capital will flow. But that also is relevant in terms of keeping organizations here. There has to be a reason that they want to be here. And so whether that's access to pilots, whether that's access to funding, whether that's access to mentorship, or whether that's access to talent, those are all key ingredients. There are very few organizations who are going to stay here just because this has happened to be where they live. That's not how organizations survive. We need to create meaningful reasons that people call this home, which is why I think there's so much of a move towards these platform developments, whether by Alberta Innovates or by WD, where it's how do we create infrastructure where we're only solving the problem once. And I think the Hatch program, for those of you who are familiar with that, is a great example of that, right? Should every single SME struggle with how to work with our electronic health record? Or if we can solve it for one SME, can we then create a platform that all other SMEs, right, can use to go through that same journey? So we're only having to, really tackle that problem once. And I think that is something that will ultimately create the drive for capital here, is if we can demonstrate that we've created a number of platforms that accelerate development here that are just not available anywhere else. The companies will want to grow and develop here, and people will want to deploy capital here because it has a higher chance of success, and it has a higher chance of success sooner in its go-market path. And that is not an easy thing to do. But there are very few jurisdictions where we can call a room of 14 people together, like we have with like the Health City Steering Committee, and you've got leaders from all of the major organizations who have to look each other in the eye and say, we really can't do this. I think that is one of the things we need to recognize, is that sometimes we think of our ecosystem, because of its level of integration, as this insurmountable challenge. But what we forget is that there's very few jurisdictions where you can put a handful of people in a room and move big mountains, right? And we need to really start perceiving that as and our structure as an asset that we need to leverage and build on, rather than as a liability. As I've often heard over the last few years, it's our biggest challenge. Well, but it's also our biggest opportunity, and in part of it is how we frame that.
So how do you see that? This is a solid step in Edmonton and Calgary being involved and working together. How do you see that extending across the province to Lethbridge and some of the innovation centers in Southern Alberta and other parts?
Yeah, I mean, we have natural hubs for development centered around U of C and U of A, but they should not be exclusive, right? What we need to create is an inclusive platform across Alberta. We need to find opportunities that, and a great example is when we created the accelerator program in Edmonton at DynaLIFE. One of the first organizations in was actually Scientra out of Calgary, who's working on breast cancer. And so, it should not matter where in the province you are to access mentorship, access, resources. Health is a provincial platform, and we should be viewing that platform as a development platform. And I want to be very clear that health is beyond AHS. AHS is not the only health organization and the only health system that we have in this province. We have a huge primary care systems to tap into. We have all kinds of measures. And I think Justin, alluded to that, is that we sometimes think that there's only one path in this province to pilots or trying different technologies. And that is just not true. But it needs education, right? And people need to know that if I'm developing something at U of L, what are those things that are available to me within my region, within my jurisdiction, and how can I leverage a program that may be happening in Edmonton, but is creating an opportunity for me in my hometown, in my home hospital, right, or in my home primary care. That is a navigation thing that we need to do across the entire province, which is one of the reasons for sort of taking Health City and now expanding the steering committee to involve members to steer it at a provincial level on behalf of the entire province. And that does not just mean Edmonton and Calgary. That means Grand Prairie, that means Fort McMurray, that means Lethbridge, that means Medicine Hat, that means Red Deer, right? And everything in between.
Excellent. Thanks for that. First question from the floor. As a future analytics graduate, where in Alberta's health ecosystem will there be new positions opening?
I truly think it's going to at some point here reach a tipping point where it explodes, right? And the explosion is going to come primarily, I believe, in pre-symptomatic care, right? Up until this point in time, we really have had a health system focused on symptomatic care, but pre-symptomatic care, when we're starting to, diagnose things, right, and look at big data and population data and predictive medicine, where we are identifying opportunities to intervene long before we begin symptoms, long before we actually have symptoms, long before we become abnormal, long before our blood sugar crosses that line. I think that's where there are going to be huge opportunities in the future. And that is going to be a lot of analytics because it is meaningful at a population level. And the challenge is no population is the same. So you have to actually establish what normal is for a rural remote community in order to determine what abnormal is, right? In order to determine where an intervention is required. Because, you can't just use population data created in California to decide what is right for a Nuvik. It just doesn't work that way. So I think there's a huge opportunity for those people who are in analytics as we get into sort of more complex pre-symptomatic care. And also the integration of care paths, that navigation of care paths, I think will be another huge area of opportunity.
So how do you see blockchain technology playing a part in future advancements of the healthcare system? And if you do see it as part of the future, where do you believe it'll start?
Well, now you're talking to the accountant, so I can't say I'm a blockchain expert. But what I look at blockchain is it's in its purest form, it's a chain of custody, right? And so it allows us to track with absolute confidence data through a system. And when you're thinking about decisions around people's health, or you're thinking about people's identity or the identity of things, right? The idea that you can use blockchain to break down integration barriers between systems, right? And have a source of truth by which you have confidence in a piece of data. I think, you know, health and finances are the two areas where those are really important things, right? And so I think, you know, health will have huge application for blockchain as an integrator and as a source of truth in the future.
Next question from the floor. CDRD in BC and Mars in Ontario have been very successful in bringing innovations together from academia and partner with industries and bringing huge amount of capital. But we don't see that happening in Alberta. How do you see that progressing given where we're at today?
Yeah, I think, you know, it's important to acknowledge that those programs didn't just show up out of nowhere, right? There was a lot of work that happened long before those came. And we need to recognize we are not necessarily at the same place that those two jurisdictions are. That being said, we are accelerating towards that place. And a good example is, you know, even for my organization, you know, we're partnering with the teams in Calgary to establish new opportunities to create new centers where biotech companies can develop together off campus, right? And so that work has started. You know, I think the announcements of the new the Masterminds program that's coming out of the U of A. There's a lot of, and this is why this focus on platforms. When you think about Mars is a platform for development. It's not about a single SME. It's about a platform to develop a whole bunch of SMEs and a whole bunch of industry partnerships. And the interesting part with Alberta is we have shifted how we talk and how we invest and what we look at over the last number of years away from pursuing individual opportunities or individual companies. That's still happening. But the big focus now is on how do we solve problems how do we create platforms by which multiple SMEs can flourish? So, you know, I think it's happening. Are we at a Mars stage? No, we're not at a Mars stage. Will we be at some point? We probably will. But the interesting part is, you know, how will that model evolve, right? And we may actually leapfrog a Mars model to a model that's different, right? And, you know, and so I don't think we need to, I don't think we should measure ourselves against what Mars has or hasn't done or, you know, what they've done in a jurisdiction. We need to do what makes sense for Alberta and deliver it in a way that's truly the Alberta way. We need to differentiate that way. You know, there's so many people who are just look to other jurisdictions and copy what they do. I think it's important to learn from what they've done, but we do need to make it unique. We need to make it something that makes us different. You know, just from a geographic perspective, we're going to be at a disadvantage from a population and everything else. So we have to use the things that make Alberta special to create our own version of what Mars looks like. And it may not look like what Toronto has.
It's an interesting point. One of the things that we talk about with people is you look at these organizations and say, we want to be Montreal, or we want to be Toronto, or we want to be Chicago. And what we try and explain to them is, okay, that didn't explode and happen overnight. So if it's taken them 10 years to get there, we need to go back and look at where they were 10 years ago and learn from the challenges to get to where they're at. And maybe we can do it differently. Maybe we can avoid some of those mistakes. We'll probably make our own. But really build that plan together as to how we move out and towards that. And like you say, it could be a completely different path, but the objective eventually is to be as good or better while they're improving. You talked a little bit about this in your presentation, but the importance of organizations and companies working together. Why is that so critical in making this work?
Well, you know, I think that goes back to even the question before, which is, I don't want to be Montreal, and I don't want to be Vancouver, and I don't want to be Toronto. I want to be Alberta, and I want that to have its own meaning, and I want that to mean something, and I want that to be relevant, right? But we are only a population of 4.5 million people. We are not even a major U.S. city in population. We need to act like a population of 4.5 million people, not like a population of 1 million people or 500,000 people. We just don't have the luxury of playing like that. And you know, what I have seen in our ecosystem is that we have no shortage of great ideas. We have no shortage of great products, and we have no shortage of great research. Our challenge is not giving that away at the earliest opportunity. Our challenge is building talent that understands how to get those across the finish line, that create jobs and create organizations and create spin out entities that create new jobs and new organizations and new ideas. We have no shortage of great ideas, and our ideas stand up with the best in the world. And we have seen that when our companies go and participate in accelerators in other parts of the world, our technologies are great technologies and our ideas are great ideas. We need to create great companies and investable companies and companies that have a reason to want to continue doing it here. And we need to create an Alberta that does that. And, you know, I think that is why everyone needs to work together, because, you know, we are just not big enough to be fragmented. And, you know, we will not attract, you know, players like WD if they're busy having 3 different discussions in the province, all with competing interests, right? They want to have one discussion. They want to know we're all on the same page. They want to know that they're not going to get called out in the paper because they made this investment versus that investment. They want to know that, you know, if they work with us, they're going to work with us as partners, right? And there is so much opportunity. There is just zero value, right, in pitching against each other. It just makes absolutely no sense. You know, we're just not big enough. We're just not relevant enough to start going down that path, right? We need to focus on what does it mean to be health and ecosystem and biotech ecosystem in Alberta? What are those advantages? How do we leverage those advantages? How do we build some anchors? We need more companies that are in that sort of 10, 15, 20, 50, 100 people range. We have amazing companies, but they're 1s and 2s and 3s and 5s. Right? And you know, you can't build scale on 5-person organizations because you know those organizations. You know, Rob, we sometimes talk about fast fail, and we forget that one of the benefits of fast fail is that if you have an ecosystem that's healthy and you fast fail, although those people don't go away, they just go tackle a new idea and a new opportunity until they find the one that hits it and goes to the next level, right? And so fast fail, you know, is really about our ability to cycle through our ideas as quickly as possible to find the winners and then accelerate those winners and have a reason why those organizations want to stay and do their next idea here. To me, the cycle doesn't end with a one-hit wonder, right? Our goal as a province should be that we have organizations who are pursuing their second product to market. To me, that's what success looks like, not the blockbuster first one. The blockbuster first one's a one-off. The blockbuster second one shows me we've got organizations that are here to stay. They're able to take new ideas. They understand what they've learned. They now know what the path to market looks like, and they know what success looks like. To me, that's where our ecosystem, that's where Alberta needs to be.
So last question, and to the audience, if there's additional questions, as I said, we will get answers to them. Just put them in the chat and we will get answers back to you. But Jason, I'll put the CEO hat back on. How's DynaLIFE shifting the healthcare system in a positive direction?
Well, as I sit here as CEO of DynaLIFE, I mean, obviously COVID was an interesting one, but I think COVID also has really opened everyone's eyes to what is possible in the biotech and why biotech is important in Canada. And whether that discussion drives safe supply, you know, the reality is COVID will fade and people's memories are short. But so we need to act now while there is interest in this space. And I think, you know, what people don't realize is, for example, you know, the reason we have the curling bubbles, the reason we have the NHL bubbles, the reason we have the World Junior bubbles is not because it's because we actually built new tests and new technology to do that didn't interfere with public health. And other jurisdictions couldn't do that and weren't able to do that, right? And so, you know, we stood up to support curling and hockey in Southern Alberta. We stood up a lab in 60 days and built brand new COVID testing technology and deployed it and had it sort of approved in order to support all of that. That is the kind of entrepreneurial spirit we have in Alberta. And we need to not forget about that. We know how to make things happen. And we watched all these other jurisdictions walk away from all of those opportunities. That NHL run alone injected $40 million into the Edmonton region, right? And almost every other province walked away from that opportunity because they couldn't figure it out, and they couldn't figure out how to take care of their public health and take care of Albertans at the same time as making sure that we can keep the wheels rolling in our economy. And I think, we need to forget Alberta is about opportunity. That's why people come here, because we know how to do stuff. And so as the CEO of DynaLIFE, I'm very optimistic. I have lots of hope. I think we're in a good place in this province. I think we have the resources we need to accelerate out of this. I think the key is to make sure that as a jurisdiction, we are ready and able and willing to move faster than other jurisdictions. And I don't mean that by taking risks. I mean that because we've planned, we have the capability, we have the skills, and we have the confidence to do.
Excellent. Great note to end on. Thank you very much, Jason, for not only your time today, but the time you put into the ecosystem, supporting all of us and supporting the entire, the whole sector moving forward. We really appreciate your dedication to it and the support that DynaLIFE shows to not only the organizations, but the investment that you make into the community. So thanks again. We really appreciate it.
Well, thank you. And honestly, I just want to thank Justin, even though he's here in spirit, not in person. I think it's great that he has made this a focus of WD, and I do think this is a really critical opportunity. And so, he certainly has my full support in that role.
Okay, excellent. So to the audience, one of the feedbacks we had yesterday was, can you give us a chance to stand up and actually move between the sessions? So we're going to be able to do that now. We'll be back at 11:15. I'm excited because I'm going to be actually joined here in the global studios of BioAlberta by Susan Carlisle, who's our moderator for the bioindustrial panels session. So you've got about 17, 18 minutes. Do some jumping jacks, grab a break and a coffee and a water, and we will see you back here in a few short minutes.
Well, BioAlberta is an organization that brings together all the different efforts to create biotechnology in Alberta. And I think they have been very successful in trying to link and create an organization. And it's very important when a community gets bigger and you need more people and more biotechs to nurture the environment to make biotechnology part of Alberta's diversification. And I think that BioAlberta has played a very important role in helping to nurture that. Biotech companies like to interact with each other as well, and the people working in different biotechs. So that BioAlberta is a link between the biotechnology industry and the provincial government and the federal government, so they know what's happening in Alberta in the biotech industry. I think that BioAlberta is very important because what we're realizing, and I think it's becoming more and more evident, that it's not only important to do the research, but it's also very important to translate the research into products that benefit humankind. BioAlberta is a organization that helps sell the message of the importance of translation and getting discoveries into medicines and into vaccines that benefit humankind. Biotechnology is going to continue to grow. We need to see the investment in supporting BioAlberta and the biotechnology in the industry. Often it takes time for discoveries to be translated into products that benefit people. And it's through that long period of time that we need government support. And in the end, we will create jobs, we'll create industry, and we'll create companies like this that are benefiting the province at the present time. Researchers have to have a way to file patents. We look in Canada and see that Canada punches above its weight for research, and our discovery research is extremely good. But we also have guidelines that say we can't use the money from our research grants for patents, and often it's difficult to get patents done. If Canada is going to build the biotech industry, it has to look at how we invest in it and how we invest all the way from research through translation, through patents, and finally to produce products. In Canada right now, with COVID-19, we're seeing that we wished we'd made investments in biotech industry 10 and 15 years ago. Probably when SARS hit in 2002, 2003, there was an intent to do and change a number of things. And we did develop the Public Health Agency of Canada, and we did develop the National Laboratory in Winnipeg. Is another gem for not only Canada, but for the world. And we needed to develop some of the biotechnology manufacturing sites for vaccines and therapeutics. We haven't got that developed enough, and the industry isn't as big in Canada. We need to see a system that partners academia, the researchers in academia, with government support, and industry has to be in there as a partner. And that's how we're going to try and get biotech really developed. It's a partnership between the three: government, academia, and industry.
More than ever, the patient is playing a central role in healthcare. He's better informed, engaged in prevention and wellness, and his needs are more and more precise. He's now at the heart of open innovation, collaborative research, and the convergence of multiple sciences. MedTech is the Quebec Consortium for Industrial Research and Innovation in Medical Technology. Its goal is to accelerate the development of innovative technological solutions to improve patients' health and quality of life. How? By bringing together the key players in healthcare innovation: companies, colleges, universities, research centers, and healthcare providers. MedTech builds bridges between the complementary skills of each member. Thus, researchers, developers, and clinicians collaborate to develop new technologies and transfer them rapidly to the field. The outcome? Solutions that better address patients' needs, transform the provision of care, and promote Quebec's know-how in medical innovation. As of 2018, MedTech has expanded its activities across Canada as a center of excellence for commercialization and research. The consortium can now directly support innovative startup and SMEs and accelerate the development of their technologies within leading Canadian healthcare networks. How? First, by creating and financing beachheads, clinical sites selected for their excellence in sectors where Canada is already recognized as an international leader: simulation and medical robotics, rehab and human performance, imaging and neuroinformatics, and artificial intelligence. Each beachhead will act as a living lab where technologies will be validated within clinical environments of excellence. Beachheads will also be implemented in international markets with global partners. Second, by offering 3 levels of investment to finance SMEs in the maturing and adoption of their solutions. Loans up to $100,000, convertible instruments up to $200,000, and equity up to $1 million. Your partner from concept to market. MedTech, innovation for health.